Hello, it is currently April 8th, 2024. My name is Alyssa Knappen. I am here with
Madeline Flint
and
Lauren Manso.
And we are interviewing
Beth Somoza.
Beautiful. Would you mind spelling it out for us?
Yeah, Lilybethsomoza.
Perfect. So, tell me a little bit about where and when you were born.
All right, so I was born on November 9th, 2001 in Miami, Florida, the lovely Florida. Miami, Florida, yeah. And I was the eldest of three. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. I loved growing up in Miami. It was so much fun and just a cultural experience that I really appreciate now that I've moved out. Yeah, that's when I was born.
Okay, yeah. So how do you identify? What are your pronouns?
My pronouns are she, her. I identify as a woman, a lesbian woman.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about, you got into it just a bit there.
Yeah.
Your upbringing, your family.
Yeah, so I grew up in Miami. I was the eldest of Nicaraguan immigrants, first-gen immigrants in Miami. I was about 3-4 years old when my brother was born, Aaron. He's like my bestie. And I enjoyed being the eldest. I enjoyed playing the mommy role. I was a pretty extravagant little older sister, carrying him around everywhere, and I like being the center of attention alongside him.
How would you say your upbringing influenced your identity and your expressions of it? So, like, tell me a little bit, some life stories, if you'd like to share them, pertaining to, like, your queerness, like maybe coming out, figuring out who you are, all that jazz.
So growing up in Miami, I feel like there's some preconceived notions that you start to sense of what like being a woman is and the like cultural aspect of it all. And in Hispanic households, like women tend to have this very particular, particular traits that you take on as a woman, like maybe the caretaker or sort of, the religious sort of, what's that called? Just kind of what the family relies on in a religious aspect and like everything aspect. And you kind of start to sense that as a very young girl. Being the eldest too, you begin to realize that you have to take this role of like a very put together, polite, strong Hispanic woman. And it takes a toll on you a bit, especially as a Hispanic woman and what that entails. It entails, being strong against adversity or being first gen, figuring out life in a new country. As like the oldest, you have to also take care of like your family and figure stuff out for them as well. And figuring out that you're queer alongside all of that is not the easiest of feats. But it is a very nice challenge and an exciting journey that I've enjoyed, and I would describe it as a beautiful and empowering journey.
So tell me about when you came out, like sort of when it was, how you knew, how your friends and family received the information.
Yeah, so I feel like I've always known that it's always been a little something inside me that I never really wanted to accept. I grew up very religious, so, Christians and Hispanic or Catholics and Hispanic go alongside, and that's just something you follow. It's something you don't question. It's just how it is. And I feel like once you start sort of like educating yourself and reading maybe things that you are not, you're not, supposed to be reading according to like the church or your family, there's no going back. And I remember kissing girls as a little girl, playing mom or mom and dad. And it's something I never really liked to think about. But I feel like once around high school, I had my best friend. She was a lesbian. She was the only lesbian in my Christian private school. And it was just something that I like saw in her that was just like, that that sort of feels right, I guess, to me. And I think around that time is when I started accepting it. And I officially came out in 2020, so 4 years ago, pretty recent. And it was scary, but at that point I feel like I had done away with all sorts of like religious, burdens, and I came to terms with it pretty well. It wasn't something, I know people have terrible experiences like while being in the church or while being at home. That could be pretty heavy stuff, but I was pretty removed from church and home, so it wasn't too crazy.
So how was queerness discussed in your youth, if it was discussed at all? How did you come to understand like what it meant to be queer, and also like what it means to be a woman?
It was very frowned upon. It wasn't like very directly talked about. It was sort of something you knew that existed, but you didn't know much of. It was wrong. That's all you kind of knew. But I sort of deep down always knew that it was a little stupid to feel and think that loving another person was wrong, because God is love. So how is loving another person wrong? So I've always had that deep down in my heart, but still, church, still pretty strong beliefs that you have to do away with. But yeah, you never really talked about it. It was just like, in Hispanic culture, they're like, oh, he's gay. But you don't say the word, you just go like this. So yeah, it wasn't directly talked about. It's just something, oh, it's wrong.
So do you ever feel like excluded or marginalized by your immediate community?
Definitely. I feel like there's just like these crazy stereotypes, especially like my best friend back home, she's Cuban. When I came out to her mom, when I came out to her mom, she's like my second mom. I love her. She immediately like brought up this like extreme example of like her life in Cuba before Castro and all of that. And she had like this neighbor who was a lesbian woman, and she said that being a lesbian was just something so crazy and dangerous because there's so much like physical abuse and like domestic violence that isn't talked about, which does bring up the fact that sometimes domestic violence isn't talked about in the lesbian community or just like the gay community in general. But yeah, it was just like this crazy. Mind you, I just came out to her and I was like the first thing she said, and she's like, it's very dangerous. People don't talk about it because you're both girls, so please like be careful. And I mean, they have these crazy stereotypes that obviously you're gonna have to deal with, unfortunately. But yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how those stereotypes impact your identity as a woman, like impact your conceptions of femininity.
So thankfully this interview has made me like reflect upon like my journey with my femininity, and thankfully it has progressed into like this beautiful thing. I had never really thought about it as deeply as I did the past couple of days. When, like I said, being in Miami and growing up as like a first-gen Latina, you take on this role of like being the strong and like proper, delicate sort of woman, and also you bring in like beauty aspects. Like growing up in Miami, like a woman has to be like dressed to the nines or proper, or like has to look a certain way, has to talk a certain way, has to say certain things, can't say certain things. And being very religious, I was very proud of my religious woman sort of thing I had going on. I like really dove into that sort of, I'm a proper woman and I'm different and all of that. And for a while, that's what being a woman meant to me, like, being submissive to either family or people around me. And yeah, I was very proud of that. I really, that's all I knew. So it was it was that. But then it sort of transitioned into this, questioning of everything you've ever known, to be true. And then you start sort of not having approval from like your immediate family, your peers that you've known your whole life. And it wasn't like you're not being the same girl you used to be. You're not the same girl I miss. You're not, you're not growing up to be the girl I envisioned you to be. And it's crazy how, society sort of like, or especially in my culture, has this like idealized future of what a woman is supposed to do. And obviously when I came out as gay, it's like, no, you're supposed to grow up and go away and have a farm
Right.
and have your man.
Yeah.
But and now it's transitioned into just me being me, and whatever that may look like. Definitely not what it did at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The very beginning.
Do you feel like once you kind of identify yourself publicly as gay, that you've had like sort of a masculine identity placed upon you?
Oh yes, definitely. One of the first things that my mom said was like, don't start dressing like a boy. Like that's where I'll draw the line. Or don't sort of take up this persona, which is crazy because not all lesbians are going to look that way. I can look like this and still very much love women. But yeah, definitely, I've had people say crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Just.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. When I started talking to like my friends from high school, because when I moved out is when I like officially came out, and I feel like I felt safe. I felt so distant from like my past life back home that I was deconstructed from whatever. When I went back to Miami and I talked to my friends, slurs were said, and it's crazy because back home, at least where I grew up, slurs are like a part of like your everyday vocabulary because just ignorance, honestly, and it's so sad. But just slurs were said in a joking manner, and what else are you supposed to do but just stand there and like sort of, put up your limits and put up some boundaries, set up some boundaries. But it's just so, and these are people like now, like this was like recent, like how is that still going on? But it sucks.
Yeah, kind of going off of that, how do you feel about like kind of reclaiming slurs? Because queer was once, that was considered a slur at one point, and so now that's kind of like an academic word. How do you feel about like reclaiming those slurs?
Honestly, I'm all for it. But I know certain people have, experiences that might be
really can make it
exactly
no matter what the person's intention is.
Exactly. But I'm all for it. I'm really all for it. I feel like we've come such a long way that we can do what we want.
Just 1 second. I just wanted to ask, because you mentioned that your mom sort of drew a line when it came to like dressing as like more masculine, I guess.
Yeah.
How much do you think like this idea of like conditional acceptance sort of influenced how you present yourself today?
Very good question. I'm not afraid. I was very afraid of that, when I would like dress ever so slightly more masculine. I was afraid of like what people might say, that maybe I was like playing into my like lesbian or queer stereotype. But it is something that you have to sort of walk yourself through. And I definitely did. I'm literally myself right here is like who I am, and I'm presenting as I fully am. But yes, at first it was something, how do I dress? What do I do? What isn't okay? What's too much? What's too little? That's a great question.
Yeah, you made that up. Absolutely.
You did.
So kind of moving to, well, I guess we're not really moving away from what we were just talking about, just talking about femininity in general.
Yeah.
How would you say, like, your conceptions of femininity have changed over the years?
Sorry. They've, like I mentioned, they've changed, they've transitioned quite a lot. But I feel like at first it was very like complacent to those like around me and their version of femininity, and now it's more me just taking from all sorts of like bits that make up me, you know, my community, my upbringing, the people around me, and where I am now.
So, like, where it once was, you got your femininity outside of yourself.
Yes,
you get it from
exactly.
within.
Yeah, it was very based on what others were doing, what others wanted me to do, or you know, because like growing up, I remember like it was all, which is crazy. It was all centered around men, or at least that's how I felt. Like for me, and like in middle school, which is crazy because we're so young, but like your worth as like a girl in middle school was just like how many people are talking to you, how many boys, like, and that was it. And that was my experience at least, but it was crazy and it definitely was damaging because you're so young. But that's what it like centered for me, just how I looked, how I was, what I was saying, who I was hanging out around, and that's what that was my femininity with those around me, which is crazy.
Yeah. I understand that though.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. Would you say that there are there differences between masculine and feminine traits? Is there a real difference, or do you think that these are kind of socially constructed ideas? What do you think about that?
I feel like you know, masculine people take certain traits, but I do feel like they are sort of real in the sense that, you know, someone that is going to be a bit masculine is going to dress a certain way, and if I show up like that today, that doesn't mean that I'm like a masculine woman. It just means that I'm, you know, dressing a bit more like you, who are a masculine presenting person. But I mean, yes and no. I feel like society has definitely taken it to an extreme.
Definitely.
But
I think going along with the conversation of presentation, a question that came up for me was if anyone has ever undermined your queerness because of your feminine presentation.
For sure. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Many people didn't believe, or like sort of like laughed at me and like, you're not a lesbian just because I am like very feminine presenting, which is crazy. But yeah, and I also, when I first came out, I was like, should I be dressing more masculine in order to be taken serious as a lesbian? Why? But yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I haven't fully formulated this thought yet, but how much do you think that like the stereotype of like wearing the pants in a relationship sort of like
Is damaging.
Like, who's the man in the relationship?
Yeah, like how much do you think that like pervades your like thinking of femininity and queerness today?
We get asked that all the time. My girlfriend, she's also femme presenting, and it's just like mind blowing to people. Like, who is the man? But I actually got asked at work today because being queer and being so femme presenting, people just like to ask such invasive questions, and they think it's so normal. And I understand it's curiosity, and especially like not a lot of people. I work with like older people, so I am like the representation. So of course they're gonna ask questions, unfortunately. But no, fortunately, I'm glad they're curious. But I got asked today, like my manager, like my general manager of this establishment. So like, is she the girl? Or are you?
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. But I was reflecting upon how I feel like my girlfriend has brought me closer to my femininity. which is crazy because she doesn't feel like she is feminine, and it's something that blows my mind because she's such a girl. I could cry. She is like the pure essence. I'm gonna cry.
Yeah.
She has just really connected me to my inner woman and what that means to me, and it's so beautiful because, like I said, growing up, like I didn't feel like it was throughout it all. I was very aware that something was off, like the femininity, my womanhood, and just like all of that was like something. It was reliant on others and crazy culture, but it always felt off. It always felt like something was like weird and missing. But upon meeting her, obviously prior to that, but she has helped with that. She has brought me so much closer to my like feminine side. She's just made me feel like such a girl with everything. And I love her. Speechless.
So beautiful.
Thanks.
What would you say, like, community-wise, have you found that comfort in, like, communities within your city, whether it be Miami or Gainesville?
Yeah. I've yet to find it in Miami, but I've liked to see the change because Miami is sort of like evolving, which is super fun to see. Now that I've moved out is when the queer community is pretty established, but yes, when I went to my first Pride, I remember that was like when I first had that little warm fuzzy feeling of like community and what it feels, and it was so beautiful. It's an indescribable feeling for that first time to just be surrounded by acceptance and love. But yeah, here in Gainesville, I have found a lot of gay Hispanics that I socialize with and call family.
Real quick, speaking to that, it's interesting because our previous interviewee sort of talked about like moments in which everything sort of aligns and they feel like perfectly comfortable and they feel like it's right.
Yes.
Can you speak more to like those moments and if those are like occur at all in your life?
Yeah. I feel like the very first moment in which I felt that was like my first like romantic relationship with a woman, it was like out of the movies. It was it was right. It felt real. It felt like everything. I was so young. Well, not really young. I came out pretty late. I came out like at 20, which not super late, but a late bloomer. And at 20 to just be experiencing all of that for the first time was a lot. But what was your question again? I forgot. Sorry.
No, just do you ever feel? Because you said that you felt like this like warm, fuzzy feeling inside.
Yeah, aligned.
I just wanted you to speak more to that, if possible.
Yeah, just like when I met her, and I was just like, oh my god, so this is what like liking someone is supposed to feel like. Mm. That's crazy.
Did you have like relationships with men in high school?
Oh my god, yeah. I had like a 4-year like. We were about to like get engaged. Like I've been like nearly engaged twice, yeah. Which is crazy. But like that just goes to show I was just so like I wanted to make it happen. Like it feels right, like this is what's supposed to happen. Yeah, I did, and that also like further invalidated like my queerness to the people around me because like no you literally dated so many boys.
Wow, so like even to this day, that's
oh my god, yeah. So yeah, like my ex's friends and families, they're like, we remember when you dated him. I'm like, yeah, I'm glad you do. I did, unfortunately. But yeah, when I first met her, and then Pride, and I feel like when people around me or like my brother just like they get to say that like I'm a lesbian because. I mean, I only met I've only known of like 1 or 2 lesbians throughout my middle school and high school, which is not a lot. So I kind of like love that I am that for like the people around me. Like, yes, you can look like me being like super either femme or Hispanic or just whatever, and be lesbian. But yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what you think about kind of going back to what we were saying about femininity in a queer relationship. How do you feel about like the butch femme sort of dichotomy? Do you think that it is like a separation, or is it like a spectrum? How do you feel about that?
Definitely a spectrum. And I know people sometimes need to have some sort of like identifier or like just something that feels right. But what I find a problem is when like other people or just like the community itself wants to box people into these stereotypes, because like, you know, if you yourself decide to, you know, title yourself with that, that's so slay. But when people of our community or just like others decide to sort of like box us into that is like what I find a problem with. But like, yeah, definitely a spectrum. There's everything and anything. You can be in between and all of them at once.
So kind of one more question before we get into like the closing questions. How would you say, you know, growing up in the age of the internet, how would you say that social media and the internet has impacted your identity and your understanding of queerness and femininity and all that?
Yeah, I feel like without the internet, I don't think I would have come to these realizations myself, just because they're hard, you know, like they're hard to accept. And knowing, like reading online and hearing of people that like were also like either gay or like were like feminists. Like I remember when like my first like sort of running into like the idea of feminism, because I went to private Christian school. Everything was just so like heavily monitored and like filtered. I remember my mind was blown. I was like, what? Feminism? This sounds really cool. This sounds right. This, you know, and that obviously catapulted and sort of butterflied effect into like me finding out that I was like a lesbian and like having this new title on what femininity to me means. Because before me finding out all of that, it was like this very particular thing. So without the internet, like I don't think I would have had like the courage to say this is it, just knowing that other people were, you know, going through it and I wasn't like either crazy or, you know, wrong. Very helpful. Yay internet, slay internet.
Okay, right on.
Yeah.
That's not always the way that it goes.
I know.
Sometimes it's very confusing kind of place.
Yes, I mean it is.
Conflicting, contentious.
Yeah.
Real quick, sorry. To that end, did you find many resources online that sort of help you come to terms with your identity, or maybe connect you with other individuals who shared sort of similar, you know, aspects sort of on femininity or queerness? Yeah,
when I first like found that out within myself, like I was just like everywhere, Hispanic, Latina, gay, like I was on that. I was on it all the time. I was looking up words, I was looking at TikToks, I was looking at videos. I was on that. I was on that. It felt nice, you know, seeing other people and seeing me in them.
Sort of on the topic of community, how do you feel about sort of social justice movements, pride movements? You mentioned that you had been to your first pride here in Gainesville, right? Tell me about like your participation in those movements, and sort of your experiences with that, how you feel about those.
I love them. I feel like they're such an amazing event for just everyone to be a part of and see, because I feel like so many people have this sort of like sexualized view on the gay community, and just seeing us out there taking up space, doing whatever it may be. Like sometimes it's family events, you know, or just like events for the community, like in St. Pete. I love St. Pete Pride. It's like, I'm going this year. I believe it's like the biggest in Florida. I'm not sure. I think
might be Orlando, but
I think
St. Pete's very prevalent.
Yeah, it is. St. Pete is super gay. I love St. Pete. That's one of the moments where I was like, oh my God. Yeah, you see gay flags everywhere. What was I saying? Yeah, in St. Pete, just Pride, yeah. St. Pete, the city itself, is very, very, very Pride focused too. Like a lot of their buses are Pride flags. So imagine little me seeing a Pride flag bus.
Yeah.
Question: Pride? Yes. It was. It's a lovely event, and I love seeing all sorts of people and families, and I love that other people can see our community just being happy and saying that we're here and we're queer.
Yeah. To that end, I know in Pride a lot of the conservative right sort of target Pride and say that it's like over sexualizing like individuals and it's like purely about sex.
Yeah.
What are your comments on that?
I say they're so close-minded because like of course 2 girls are gonna want to kiss themselves. They're pretty and they're 2 girls. Duh. But I it's so sad because I see myself in them because I once was them, you know? So I understand I don't understand, but I see it. I try to understand it. But I think it's sad. I think it's so sad that you, first of all, take the time out of your day to go there. Like, come on, you have better things to do with your day. But yeah, they definitely they're sort of like the responsibles for over sexualizing because it's not us. It's not us doing that.
And so sorry. On the topic of like sexualizing your bodies, I know like going back to like Hispanic stereotypes and stuff like that, I know a lot of Hispanic women are sort of sexualized and reduced to their bodies. And so what do you think about like either queer women sort of assuming more masculine appearances or just generally like what do you think of the stereotype of like sexualizing women and how does that sort of confound queerness or vice versa?
You know, now you said that, back to the work stories, but I have so many of them. This guy at work, you know, many people are like, oh, I'm okay with 2 girls, but gay men, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I heard that at work the other day. They were talking about UC, and they're like, oh my god, yeah, UC. And then I was like, oh my god, my place. I've only been there like once.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's my people. And he's like, oh, you're gay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm gay. And he's like, oh, you're cool, but you know.
But.
I know, the but followed. Right. And I was like, and then it was like, no, you know, I see you and like you're cool girls are right, but like I see boys and like men and like I can't do that. And it's like, it goes back to us just being sexualized and they don't see that, you know, to them it's like, no, boys is wrong, but the reason is because they see 2 girls kissing and they're like, yeah. Which is, that was like the other day.
Wow.
Yes. So, yeah, they're definitely hard comments to hear. And it's also sad because they don't realize that that's why gay men are not okay. And they don't realize that they're sexualizing women, sexualizing me in the workplace. Yeah. But your other part of the question was masculine presenting.
Or just
like your body, right? Yeah. So being from Miami, you know, when I went back to Miami, I was like, oh my god, like what do I dress? This is my first time back as like a lesbian woman. What do I look like? And it sort of started that like, what do I look like in Miami as a lesbian woman? And you know, I show up as I am. And the different other girls, the other lesbian girls that I did grow up seeing, they definitely did take on this, like you said, sort of very feminine, but like sexualized, unconsciously sexualized sort of persona. Unfortunately, I'm sure, well, I didn't realize it either, but it was, you know, it was because of our surroundings and how we were, you know, in middle school. And like I said, it was like so men focused and like it was surrounded on boys and everything we did was for them. But yeah, crazy.
Did you also find that sexualization and like fetishization prevailed further with like being in a femme-femme relationship?
Yeah, I tell my girlfriend all the time, because I'm like, bro, I want to take you to Miami so you can experience like what I experienced. And I'm like unlearning. When I first moved out, like a couple years ago, I was still in the process of unlearning all of that. And obviously you don't realize it when you're in it, but like once I was removed is when I was like, oh my God, you know, like my appearance would like stress me out, like to like an insane and unhealthy amount. Yeah, in a femme-femme relationship, I feel like we show up as, yes, feminine, but sometimes that looks different, you know?
Definitely,
Yeah, sometimes that it doesn't look so feminine, but we're still very feminine. And what does that mean? You know, back to the femininity. What does that mean? Like I said, how am I feminine if I'm not so feminine?
Yeah.
But that, like I said, it kind of goes back to the process I've like gone through in like establishing the little nitpicks of like my surroundings and my cultural upbringings and just everything I've gone through and like making it me. It's hard to describe exactly how, because it's such a mosaic of like everything I've been through, but I show up as me and she shows up as herself, and it's feminine. It's feminine.
So, tell me a little bit about how you feel about sort of the current sort of political route that Florida is going in regards to LGBTQ plus rights.
It's nerve-wracking, especially as of recently, like what's happening here at UF, the DEI department, and like New College. You know, New College has...
Yeah, I used to really want to go there.
Yeah, New College was like the place to be, and unfortunately, it was a safe haven for a lot of queer people. I looked at the statistics, and I believe like over 50% of, well, obviously a very high percentage of everyone there was part of the LGBT community.
Yeah.
And now it's, you know, it's very low. It's like sports. I think it's athletes from all over the country now, which is crazy. But yeah, it's definitely really sad to see, because it's happening in the secondary education sort of realm, which is such an important part, especially here in Florida.
And in primary education.
Yeah, in primary too, with the banned books.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, banned books. It's really sad to see, because like, for example, bringing it back to my home life, like my sister and people at my home, only my mom knows that I'm gay. Well, and my brother, but like my stepdad that like lives back home with me, and my sister is not allowed to know that I am. So like now knowing that in school, the only potential place where she might be able to learn about me, it's banned, and you can't talk about it. It's a little worrisome, because I worry about how she might like view me. You know, it will definitely be she'll have this weird take on the queer community, but it's sad. It's really sad, and it's worrisome, because there's not much we can do.
Something I've like kind of noticed in a lot of sort of queer circles.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of people have plans to leave Florida.
Yes.
Do you feel that way as well, that you need to go, that you need to get out of here?
I've talked about it with my mom as of late, you know. My heart is in Florida. I love the beach. I do love Florida. Florida is a place like no other. But unfortunately, because of how my community is being treated in this state, you know, it definitely is an option, and it's something that I consider, because it's not safe.
Have you noticed, I mean, it's obviously like there's certainly like political and like legislative actions that are showing a shift in the way that Floridians view queer people. Have you noticed like a corresponding shift in your own life, or has that just been mainly like a political thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I feel like all of those sort of political moves have definitely, I feel like, impacted those sort of little conversations either at work or any place because they are furthering, they allow those situations to take place. They further, which sucks because, I mean, that is what our government is literally what dictates our life to an extent. So they definitely propel those sort of behaviors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so not like an immediate shift, but obviously it has affected.
Sort of like something you've noticed progressing.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Is there anything that any stories you want to share? Any questions maybe you have, or anything that you want to be kind of cemented into the UF archives?
Oh my God. Honestly, just I think listening to yourself is something so important and something it took a long time for me to allow myself to do. And whatever that may be, just always follow whatever inside is telling you, whatever that may look like. That's really it.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Lily.
Of course.